Hi y'all, welcome back to my shop for another tip of the week. I want to talk about drive centers today. There's a lot of different varieties, some that come with your lathe and then others that you may want to consider buying. I just wanted to talk about some of the pros and cons of the different ones to help you make a decision before you waste any money, or if you go too long without buying one when it would actually be a benefit to you. Okay, here's some of the variety of drive centers that I have, and I want to show you some of the pros and cons on. First is the 4-prong that is probably similar to the one that tends to come with your with most lathes. It has a point that may be removable or it may not. I don't much care for the 4-prong because to use it, it's hard to get a bite in the wood. On a mini lathe, you don't want to be hammering this thing into your stick of wood on the lathe, or hammering the wood into your drive center on the lathe, because it damages your bearings because they're not that strong on a mini lathe. This is kind of a holdover from the old days when it was just spindle turning spindle work was mostly ballisters. To make this work, you have to have an X in your blank that you can get from either, bandsawing a square, a cross piece with maybe a block like this, and feeding this into your bandsaw. That's one technique. Or you might be using some type of center finder marker jig with a blade in it that you can stick into the corner here and then smack it with a mallet. It gives you a fairly thin cut, but that can work, but you still got to wind up kind of forcing this in a little bit with a mallet off the lathe, and then to get it seated properly. So I don't much care for that. Powermatic and some of the other larger lathes might come with one that tends to look like this, 2-prong. I like that better. That works for bowls because you can use the prong in the direction of the grain. You can pound it in off the lathe and get a pretty good bite. I tend to use this one a fair amount. This is the one I've had the longest time. This is from Powermatic. I don't think they make it anymore, but it's a step center, which means it's got these little bitty teeth and a spring loaded, so you can press the drive center into this until the wood backs up into these teeth. This one is great for very small work. Larger work, you need to have one a little larger. I rarely use this one. This is an Apprentice or Craft Supply model. It's a little over an inch big. I use this occasionally. I use the smaller brother, which is closer to 5/8 of an inch. From Woodcraft or Craft Supply, and Sorby makes a much better one. It costs about 3 times as much, but you tend to get what you pay for over the long haul. This one, it's got a spring in it, but the spring came loose. I lost the point, or I never could get the point to stay in. I had to fabricate another point, so I don't have that flexibility of a spring loaded step center. But this works well with uneven wood. And it acts as a safety center. That is, if you get a catch, it will actually spin on here and not destroy your piece. If you're using this one and you get a bad catch, it will just tear up it'll just rip the blank because it has such a firm hold. A variation of this is the safety center, which is just a cup and a point, and then I actually come back with a Dremel and cut these little grooves in it to give it a little better bite. I rarely use this, but it is it's an option. So those are some options. I do want to show you a variation of one more. Let's move over to the lathe so you can see it. And the last one I want to talk about is one that actually fits in your chuck. I don't much care for this, but some people tout the advantage that if you're doing bowl blanks, it's easy to match the tenon against this. I've never had that much of a problem, so I have not tended to do that. The other reason I don't like turning that close to the jaws from a piece of wood here in case you get a bad catch or slip. So it doesn't work for me. There are short versions of the steb type center that actually go in to your chuck, so you get the advantage of a steb center. One of the reasons you might want to use this is if your Morse taper is damaged, and it will no longer hold a Morse taper, but you can use a chuck. The ultimate solution is going to be fixing your spindle, but that is a possibility.